So when is atheism a religion and when is it not? My dad was an atheist. I don't know when he started. I don't know what his thoughts were the last few days of his life because he had stroked out and couldn't speak. But I did have, when he was told that he had just a few months to live, I had a fairly long conversation with him about it, mostly listening. And, he just said, hey, we took you to church every Sunday when you were a little kid because we thought it was good for you. And your mom was really, into it and still is, or was. I mean, she's now passed on too. And he said, but I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, but I always figured that, when you die, the lights go off. That's it. Now, personally, I have to say, I think when you die, the light goes on. I think you become part of all of it. But I didn't tell my dad that. I didn't have, like I said, I didn't want to debate him. I was just listening. And I had never known. I mean, here I was in my 50s and my father was dying and he comes out and tells me that he doesn't believe in all this stuff that he had been, taking me to church ever since I can remember about. That is atheism as not a religion, right? My dad did not believe in any particular religion. He didn't even particularly strongly hold the belief that lights just go out. It's just the only thing that made sense to him. And so I would call my dad a non-religious atheist. Now, on the other hand, I have a friend who, anytime anybody mentions religion, he's got to jump into the conversation and point out to them how stupid they are and how wrong they are. And just aggressively promote his atheism. And I would say that he has simply found another religion. He's found his religion you could call it the religion of reason. And in fact, I don't have a problem with calling it the religion of reason because the fact of the matter is that there is no objective reality. So what, are you some kind of moral relativist? Well, no. Here's how it works. We know the world through 6 senses, maybe 7th and 8th, arguably, but we have 6 basic senses. We can hear, in other words, vibrations vibrate our eardrum, and that produces data that our brain interprets as sound. Photons of light from a very, very tiny slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. A spectrum that, if it were 100 feet wide, we're seeing 1,000th of an inch of it. That little 1,000th of an inch of the electromagnetic spectrum strikes our eyes and produces electrical impulses, and we see that as vision. We have, things can touch us, and we think we understand what they are. But the fact of the matter is that if they touch us in different ways, we'll interpret it differently. We have the sense of taste and smell. But the fact of the matter is that if you cover somebody's eyes and give them an onion to bite into, they may as well think it's an apple. It's kind of a mixed bag. So anyhow, we have sense and we have taste, we have smell, and we have the vestibular system, the inner ear, which tells us whether, where we are relative to gravity. It's a gravitometer. Those are the 6 senses that we have. Our sense of balance is the last one. And then maybe we have some sort of an intuitional sense. Maybe we have some sort of a religious sense. I don't know. But those 6 senses are not in dispute. Through those 6 senses, each one of which, keep in mind, our auditory sense, our ability to hear, for example, you can't hear anything below around 30 hertz, 20 hertz. You can't hear anything above around 17,500 hertz. In fact, 17.5 kilohertz is the frequency at which flyback transformers and old TV sets used to operate because it was just above the threshold of hearing. And I remember when I was young, I could hear them. I could hear that whine because when people are young, they can hear typically up to 18 or 19,000 cycles per second, sometimes even 20K. But as you get older, your eardrum gets a little more rigid and you get less able to hear those high frequencies. The point is that there's this huge spectrum of frequencies. There are sounds that our cats can hear that my dogs, I had dogs from the time I was born until just a few years ago. our dogs could always hear, that I couldn't hear. So how can I know what reality really is when I'm only seeing a very tiny slice of the electromagnetic spectrum? I'm only hearing a very tiny slice of the auditory spectrum. I'm only feeling things in a hugely subjective way. You know, a light touch is perceived as a tickle, but if you push down nearby, you activate large nerves, which shut down the small nerves, and you can no longer tell what the light touches. That's why scratching makes itching go away. So even our tactile sense, our sense of feeling is not just highly subjective, but, you know, very narrowly defined. Our senses of smell and taste are easily fooled. And our vestibular sense, our sense of balance, you know, close your eyes and spin around 3 times, it's gone. So how can you say that you know the world through reason? How can you say that you know the world, period? We know this little tiny slice of the world that we, through our common shared senses, say, oh, this is how the world is. But if you were to discuss it with a mosquito who sees the world in infrared, you'd get a completely different world. So you say, well, you know, my religion is reason. I understand the world through reason. That's all there is. I have it all figured out. Yeah, right. With your ability to sense and understand perhaps 1/1000th of all the available data that's out there that's constantly bombarding us. You're not measuring the X-rays that are hitting you. You're not measuring the IR, the infrared radiation, the ultraviolet radiation. Those are just near to visual light. You're not sensing radio frequency radiation. You're not, you know, from ultra low frequency, from ULF all the way up to multi-gigahertz radiation. You're not sensing any of that. These huge chunks of reality that we have no ability to sense. How can we call ourselves, you know, reason-driven rational machines? I mean, we can try. We try to make sense out of things, and we do it based on what we can perceive. And we invent machines that allow us to perceive more than we understand, so that we can say, okay, this is what an atom actually looks like if you look at it with an electron microscope, or what a molecule looks like. I don't know that an electron microscope could see an atom, but you know, here's what I'm. But we're kind of taking that on faith because it's through our machine. But even at that, okay, we can agree on all this stuff, but that doesn't mean we understand everything. And therefore, I'd say even reason is a religion if somebody's evangelical about it. If they think that that is the beginning and end of all that there is. See, this is the mistake that these, you know, fundamentalist Christians make, the Christian Taliban. World, you know, like Marco Rubio the other day. He was asked, how old is the world? Well, I don't know. You know, it's something that theologians dispute. Well, maybe theologians dispute it. You know, is the world 6,000 years old? Is it 6,512 years old? Is it 5,230 years old? Is it 3.5 billion years old? Well, that would be since life began. Is it 5 billion years old since the Earth first formed? How old is the Earth? Well, we don't know, Marco Rubio says. Well, actually, yeah, we probably do. So, you know, that's pretty obviously religion. But I would say that, you know, frankly, you know, the only people I think are genuine, what you might call atheists, are really the agnostics, which is like my dad was, saying, you know, I don't really know. This is what I think. Probably nothing there. Not certain of it, but, you know, certain enough that I'll live my life based on that belief. And he was a good moral man, but he didn't need a Ten Commandment monument, you know, that Judge Moore was dragging around the country to make him a good moral man. He was one of the finest and most moral people I've ever met my whole entire life, my father. And I'm not saying that just because he was my dad. And my mother, on the other hand, was, you know, just, she was a spiritual Christian who had been visited by her dead relatives and could tell me the details of it and knew the stories. I mean, literally. When she was giving birth to my youngest brother, she had a near-death experience, and her grandmother visited her. And she had a number of these kinds of experiences, these supernatural experiences. She was absolutely convinced that right next to us, as to paraphrase William James, separated by the filmiest of tissues and openable by the smallest requisite touch, entire other worlds existed. That every now and then we would get just the faintest glimpse of. And, I share that perspective, only I share it, largely through my experiences as a teenager with psychoactive substances that shaman used to crack open the worlds and step into the other world to do work on behalf of other people. So when does atheism become a religion? In simple answer, atheism becomes a religion when it becomes evangelical. And in my opinion, and spare me the 400 emails about, how can you have a religion that's about not having something? Well, I'll tell you right now, Christians do not believe that Muhammad was the prophet. They've got a not belief. Does that make them not Christians?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Muslims, on the other hand, don't believe Jesus was the Messiah. They believe he was a prophet. So he was not the Messiah. So does that make them not religious?